heads or tails starts.
I'll flip it because he's if he's there.
I want tails.
Tails.
Ready. I got it. Okay. Starts. You are going to start.
When?
Starts.
Whenever
Do you
you're
want to
ready.
start, or do you want to be the first or second person to speak? It's your decision.
All right, I'm going.
You won the
Can I
coin
go?
flip. I didn't know if you were going. I've predicted. Yeah. So you won the coin flip starts. If you guys are cool with deciding, then it's up to you whether you want to start or not.
Okay, I'm starting.
Okay.
Alrighty. 15 minutes. Whenever you start speaking, we can. Mod 1, do you have the timer ready? Hold on, I think we might have lost him. 1 second.
Talking about gotta be on time. SMH.
Hello. Can you hear me?
There you go. Yes, yeah, we can hear you. Hey.
Okay.
We
All
did the
right,
coin
so-
flip.
In the audience,
Starts.
Yeah, hold on.
record this.
Hold on,
Yep,
hold
so
on,
whenever
hold
you're
on,
ready.
hold on. All right, let me explain what's going to happen to everyone. So, the current topic tonight is the Jesus crucifixion. Did it happen? Did it not? I'm going to introduce everyone. We're going to do the coin flip, and then we're going to talk about the rules. So, we have our first debater, Starz. Starz is a brand new Muslim. He's been a Muslim for 3 months. He is also considered the best Islamic apologetic for his words. Bless is also a
sir.
Christian. Bless has studied this topic since he was 18 and was an atheist growing up. Tonight's debate, each get 15 minutes opening. We'll have a timer. They'll have a 5 to 7 minute rebuttal. We'll have a 20-minute crossover, and then we'll have a 5-minute closing along with questions and answers. Because Starz is the younger person, he gets to take the coin or choose heads or tails. Starz, which coin would you like? Or side of the coin would you
we
like?
did. If you want it, we already flipped the coin.
We already did that. He
Okay.
won.
Perfect. So, Starz, you have 15 minutes on the clock to talk and give your opening statement on the debate topic, which will start now. So go ahead.
All right. So to show that the crucifixion is most likely to not have happened, I'll attack it on two different perspectives. First, I'll be showing why the Islamic narrative is more logical than the Christian narrative, and then I'm going to demonstrate why the main sources that historians rely on to learn about the crucifixion are all extremely unreliable, thus making the crucifixion unlikely. Now, the reason why I'm going into why the Islamic narrative is more logical than the Christian narrative is because the Christian narrative is on the crucifixion is by far the most popular, and it accepts the crucifixion. The Islamic narrative doesn't. So me showing you that the Islamic narrative is more logical strengthens my case that it never happened because the Islamic narrative denies the crucifixion. So I want Bless to realize that no matter what you try to say to prove that Jesus was crucified, it's still going to support the Islamic narrative because in Surah An-Nisa 4, 157 to 158, it states, "We have killed the Messiah, Jesus, the son of Mary, the messenger of Allah, but they neither killed him nor crucified him. It was only made to appear so." So if the Quran is saying that it was made to appear to them that he was crucified, obviously as Muslims expect to be dictated in history that he was crucified. Even if you disagree, nothing you can say can disprove the Islamic narrative because any evidence that you give to support the crucifixion is actually going to help the Islamic narrative that it appeared. So people tend to believe that the Christian narrative is more in line with history because, but the resurrection is a historical fact, but you believe in that. And which makes more sense that Jesus was persecuted for claiming to be the Messiah. They try to crucify him, and the all-powerful, all-good, omnibenevolent God saves him from it, or God creating creation, becoming creation, sacrificing himself to reach salvation, but he could have just forgave Adam, right? So then he rises from the dead, undoing the sacrifice, and multiple people also rise from the dead. What makes more sense and takes more faith to believe? People say the Islamic narrative of Jesus only appearing to be crucified is a miraculous claim, but that doesn't disprove Islam because there are miraculous claims in religion all the time. The resurrection of multiple people isn't historical, but it's miraculous. Same with the sun being static, and same with people talking animals and people living to 1,000 years old. So these points show that the Islamic narrative is more logical than the Christian narrative on this topic, and any evidence you give to support the crucifixion for this remainder of this entire debate is just going to keep supporting the Islamic narrative so that it appeared so. So be my guest. So any evidence to support the narrative that it appeared so? Wait, any evidence against the crucifixion will work in my favor. Any evidence that supports the crucifixion will work in my favor. Nothing you can do or say will refute the Islamic narratives. And now I'm going to get into reasons why the crucifixion just did not happen. The sources that historians use to come to the conclusion that Jesus was crucified are all extremely reliable. According to biblical scholar Dan McClellan, there is no archaeological evidence of Jesus' crucifixion. And if you don't like me quoting Dan McClellan, we can get into why Dan McClellan is extremely unbiased and reliable because This is a guy who believes in the crucifixion, saying that there's no archaeological evidence of the crucifixion. That is big, dude. You're cooked. The earliest surviving sources referencing Jesus of the crucifixion are Paul, a guy who wasn't there. The New Testament, which is circular reasoning, because if I take if I say Spider-Man existed and I take out a comic book and says, hey, in my comic book it says this. This is why Spider-Man existed. That would be circular reasoning. Same with the New Testament, right? um the Roman historians like Tacitus and Josephus. And the reason why they're all unreliable is because the New Testament has been corrupted. It was written decades after Jesus by anonymous authors with theological agendas, contradictions, no contemporary eyewitnesses, and it's circular reasoning. And the Gospels are completely just untrustworthy, man. They contradict each other. If I go to Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, I'm like, yo, what's up, y'all? What was the time of the crucifixion? Mark is going to say Jesus was crucified at the 3rd hour, while John 19:14-15 says that he was crucified at the 6th hour. If I say, what's up, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John? Who carried the cross? You guys were all there. You guys should all report the same thing. No, Matthew, Mark, and Luke say Simon of Cyrene carried the cross, but John says Jesus carried it himself. The last words of Jesus, different gospel reports. Yet again, Matthew, Mark, my God, why have you forsaken me? By the way, why is Jesus, who's supposed to be God, saying, my God, okay. My God, why have you forsaken me? Luke is saying, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. And John 19:30 is saying, Father, in your hands I commit my spirit. So there are constant contradictions in the Gospels, right? And if they're all claiming to report the exact same things, why do they constantly keep disagreeing with each other, right? So, dude, you're done. And secondhand sources are unreliable because they mostly just summarize and take from firsthand sources. But I've already proved to you that Matthew, Mark, and Luke and John are unreliable, untrustworthy firsthand sources. And it's heavily debated on if they're even eyewitness accounts. It's important to have reliable firsthand sources because a secondhand source that takes from an unreliable firsthand source is also unreliable. Josephus and Tacitus. Secondhand sources of Jesus are convened by people who didn't know Jesus, people whose parents didn't know Jesus, people whose grandparents didn't know Jesus, and in this case, people who were fishing for information in a sea of fabrication and deception. In the late 20th century, the sheer unreliability of the gospel led Christian scholars, Robert Empress, Richard Carrier, John Shelby Spong, and many other Christian scholars to come to the conclusion that Jesus never even existed. As a Muslim, I obviously disagree. But when even Christian scholars and historians are realizing how difficult it has become to take Christian sources seriously to the point where they are apostating and coming to conclusions like that, our confidence in the historical Jesus and the crucifixion evaporates just like that. You're done. And we have early Christian groups who denied the crucifixion: the Basilians, the Docetists, the Corinthians, the Alexis, the Manichaeans, and we even have the Ebionites, dude. And it even gets even worse for you, bruh. Because right here, hold on, I got you. Like you're cooked. You're so cooked. Early Christ, like dude, even the Simonians rejected the crucifixions, and even the Scythians, and their ideas date back to the mid-1st century. Josephus was a Jewish historian writing under Roman and like, dude, you're cooked. And can I show the chain of transmission, which disproves the New Testament's reliability mods?
You have your time. You can do whatever you want with
You
it.
have 8 minutes and 13
I can't
seconds.
share my
So this is your
screen.
time.
I can't share my screen. Okay. We can also get into forged verses, gospels copying each other, right? There is strong textual evidence that the synoptic gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, are literally dependent off of each other. They copy each other. Large portions of Mark and Luke reproduce Matthew and Luke reproduce Mark nearly word for word in Greek, indicating direct copying from a common source. Why would an eyewitness account who was there copy from another? Like, this just proves that they're not eyewitness accounts. Triple tradition. About 76% of Mark appears in Matthew and 70% in Luke, often in the same order. This is literally plagiarism. You know why it's plagiarism? Because if I'm a teacher and I have 2 students in one classroom and they're copying each other word for word for word, and I show them a video and tell them to summarize what they saw in the video, and both of the word for word, you're gonna assume that okay, maybe one of the people weren't paying attention and they just copied, just the same way how some of these gospels may not be eyewitness accounts, but are direct copies. They're liars. The Bible has been corrupted. Um, so yeah, no archaeological evidence of Jesus's crucifixion. Um, and I can also give you other historical events in the first century that have archaeological evidence. So you cannot say that the reason why there's no archaeological evidence of Jesus' crucifixion was because Jesus was all the way in the first century, right? The reign of the Emperor Augustus, archaeological evidence, right? We have sources to prove this. If you want to disagree with me, we have the destruction of the Second Temple, right? So we have other things from the first century, and I would prove this, but I've already proven it, but I only have like, dude, 7 minutes. Um, early Christian, I got into early Christian groups that didn't agree with the crucifixion, like the Basilians, the Docetists, the Cerinthians, um, the Ebionites. You know, the Docetists believed that Jesus only appeared to suffer but did not actually die 600 years before the Quran. So it perfectly, perfectly, perfectly aligns with the Islamic narrative. Early Christian groups are more reliable than the Gospels. The belief that groups of the Basilians and the Docetists could be based on traditions that predate or run parallel to the Synoptic Gospels. Since Christianity had diverse early interpretations, these groups have a preserved, original, suppressed narrative. There are theological bias in the Gospels. The Gospels were written by followers of a movement that needed to justify Christ's suffering as a salvific plan. Their authors had theological motivations to present the crucifixion as
You
a
have 5
fulfillment of
minutes left.
prophecy
5 minutes.
rather than an objective historical account. Pauline Christianity, which heavily shaped the New Testament, was formulated in a way that accommodated Roman rule, emphasizing submission to authorities. Some early groups may have rejected the crucifixion narrative because it was politically shaped rather than historically shaped. The Gospels were selected by early church centuries after Jesus, with alternative texts and beliefs that being deemed to be heretical. So now the untrustworthiness of the Gospels, right? If someone's claiming to me that they saw something, but they keep lying to me over and over and over again, I'm not going to trust that person, right? John 1:5-7, a forged verse. The reason for this dispute is because it's absent in early Greek manuscripts, right? Matthew 16:9, its earliest manuscripts, it's not fine, like it's at the end of Mark. It has no appearance of a resurrected Jesus. Um, so we can get into the forged verse. So we have forged verses, we have contradictions, we have debate on whether your first-hand sources of the crucifixion are even actually first-hand sources. We have no archaeological evidence. The New Testament is circular, and any evidence that you give to support the crucifixion for this remainder of this entire debate is just going to keep supporting the Islamic narrative. So you're done. Like, so do you want to quit now or what?
You have 3 minutes and 20 seconds left. Would you like to continue using your time?
Yeah, I'll give everything. This I've already won. I don't think he can come back from this, but
All right. You have
why I have
3 minutes and 9 seconds left.
the crucifixion isn't mentioned in any non-biblical Greek or Roman source until 80 years after Jesus' alleged death. You didn't know that, did you? Right? I got a question for you. Why do historical records outside the Bible provide little to no direct evidence of Jesus' crucifixion? Nothing, barely anything outside of the Bible that I don't believe in. Most people in the world don't believe in the Bible, but the Bible is what historians are using for evidence of this alleged event. And I already told you why it's circular reasoning. That'd be like me saying the moon split, and you're like, how do you know the moon split? And I said, it says it right here in my Quran. That's circular. So I mean, that might be it. Hold up.
If you want to cede your time, you can, but otherwise you have 2 minutes and 5 seconds.
Yeah. Yeah.
2
So
minutes left.
yeah, no archaeological evidence of the crucifixion, and yeah, Tacitus, Josephus weren't there. Paul wasn't there. You have secondhand sources who didn't meet Jesus and unreliable firsthand sources, and you have to prove that the New Testament Gospels aren't circular reasoning. I I feel bad for you. I'm sorry. Yeah, that's it, man. That's it. I won the debate. I already won.
Are you calling it?
I won. All right, let's go.
So are you ceding your one remaining minute and 15 seconds?
I'll take it to use. It's already over for him, man. But
1 minute remaining.
yeah, you have the Jewish War, archaeological evidence of that. I mean, destruction, Dead Sea Scrolls. Oh shit! I shouldn't have said that. Oh, my bad. My bad. Hey. uh, so the
30
Islamic
seconds
narrative is more
remaining.
logical than the Christian narrative, and the Gospels and all the Christian sources to support the crucifixion are all unreliable. And the ones that deny the crucifixion seems to be more reliable than the Christian sources. You have no choice but to concede to, I mean, yeah.
10 seconds.
10, 9, I already won this debate, man. You guys owe me $600.
All right. Timer. That is the
Very much.
timer. Thank you for your opening statement, Bless. You are now up.
Okay,
We'll start the timer.
I am real quick.
Yeah.
Real quick. I'm gonna take a good little shot. Wow. Got a little Abdulaziz Jr. in here. Thank you.
All right, we're gonna start. You ready?
Starting.
All right, we're starting time. And you're up, Bless.
Go. There's a beeping sound. Jesus Christ. Oh, hang on real quick. Reset the time. My bad.
Yeah.
There's a
Okay.
beeping sound that I
You're all
had
good.
for a timer, and it kept going off. I was like, what is that? Okay, let me
And
set my presentation up.
Yep. Just to let the
And
group know, if there's a technical issue, we'll reset it either on Stars or Bless side. That's a fair thing. So
yeah, because I was trying to get this ready as well. Enjoy, you little minnows. Piranha's blood in the water. All right.
Are you ready?
I can't share my screen.
Wait, he's not quitting?
No, he's not quitting.
Why?
I
can't
don't
share
know
my
how
screen.
to share screen.
It won't let me. I need that.
Yeah. Let's see.
Let me delete that real quick so we can do a reset.
So
'Cause I gotta be able to do
I'd
that.
ask no commentary until you're just if we're not
Yeah,
going to
I'm
start your
doing.
timer.
I'm. Yeah, no, I'm not. I'm just. I'm. There's no commentary. I just need to be able to share my screen.
Wait, how is he not
All
quitting? I just disprove everything.
Oh, you'll
Okay, buddy.
you'll have your own time starts to get no interaction. Just wait.
Yep.
Well, yep, we're on a technical timer here, so
When
no
you
one,
can fix
no one
that, let me
interact.
know.
Let's see. I'm not sure how to fix that.
You may have to give me a higher roll. You know I won't do anything, just so I can be able to do it.
Yeah. I don't think I'm going to be able to share. Do you really need your screen share?
Yes.
Okay. Let's do this.
Kind of like the
Give me a
main
sec.
point.
Sorry, y'all.
I don't think either of us knew that there was going to be a need for that, so we didn't test it ahead of time. Apologies.
Well, I
Yep.
said I was making a presentation. I do
That
PowerPoint
is my
presentations. I
bad.
have on every one of my debates.
It's on us.
It's all good.
Page.
We'll get it fixed.
Full settings. This is my bad. I'm sorry, everyone.
You're good. That's fine. Mistakes happen. Nobody hears Jesus.
It's true. All right. Apps. Google time. Let's see. Join channel. Sure. You should have privileges. Because I have able to stream it with the official timer. That's what we're using. Oh, you know what? Let's try this. Try now. Well, sorry about this difficulty, y'all.
Oh, did we lose West on that one?
Yeah, he's rejoining.
I can share my screen.
All right.
Beautiful.
Go ahead and share it.
Okay, let me give this little presentation out as well.
As soon as you start talking, we can start the timer.
All right, the untitled presentation number 5 is up to you, little piranhas. You guys give me 5-minute intervals. Let's have fun. Let's do it.
We'll do.
All right.
All right,
And
starting now.
timer starts. Go.
All right, so the debate is, was Jesus crucified? Blessed versus star. It's pretty simple. Since I've given out this presentation, going over some of the points, please give me credit if you do use it. It takes me hours to study these topics properly, and also the footnotes will be at the bottom sections of the page with numbers corresponding to the points given. Now, important to know, in order to conserve time, I've negated certain portions or sections of some writings and probably some also topics. In order for this, if my issue has an opponent with or anyone else, you can talk to me in the Q&A or in the cross-examination, up to you guys. So my approach tonight is simple. It's one of a historical, looking at the sources for Jesus, for and against, and sprinkled in with some understanding of ancient history, including some myths. So, 5 main points: Christian sources, Tacitus, Josephus, scholars on Jesus' crucifixion, and what art has to accomplish today. So, Christian sources. From the earliest, from Mark to John, they all attest to the crucifixion. During the period the Gospel's creation, including Roman historians like Tacitus and Josephus, were writing during the height of historical intentionality. So, as Craig Keener notes, that biographies during this period had a significant historical intention when writing about recent figures. So, in order to interpret the Gospels, we have to understand the genre of these texts. For good reasons, the academic majority consensus of the Gospels genre is that of Greco-Roman biography. This allows the Gospels to be based on actual events during this period. So, for anyone to actually say, like earlier, that the onus are the ones on the Gospels, to be not based off historical events, the onus is on the one to show that they are not based on them instead of are. So the onus is starts on that one actually based off historical procedures. Now, unfortunately, despite this, either religious bias or misunderstanding of historical practices have produced some myths into the public sphere. We'll go over 2. So myth 1, the Gospels cannot be used because of bias. Some argue since the Gospels are brought about in a Christian worldview, which is a point that Starts brought up, about documenting their teacher Jesus, whom they revered, the source cannot be used since it contains one side's praise of a subject. But this is a misunderstanding, as scholar David Hume points out. So while biography intended to emphasize the one-sided praise of the subject, it was still firmly rooted in historical fact rather than literary fiction. Thus, while the evangelists clearly had an important theological agenda, the very fact that they chose to adapt Greco-Roman biographical conventions to tell the story of Jesus indicated they were essentially concerned to communicate what they thought really happened. Indeed, bias need not have a negative connotation. If you had a bias and it's tied to something truthful, like the stopping of human trafficking, this wouldn't be a bad bias. And it was one of the biggest elements we see in ancient historical writings, such as Tacitus's Agricola about his father, Xenophon's Agesilaus, or Philo's Moses. Also, the Gospels and Epistles were written decades later. Some argue that the Gospels or Paul are written a few decades removed from the events of Jesus. He argued this as well, thus unreliable. But this alleged attack on the Gospels fails on its own merit. For one point, it's a misunderstanding of the word contemporary. In antiquity, contemporary normally meant recording an event even decades removed, sometimes even way later than that. So, for example, Tacitus's contemporary recording of Nero's fire in the 1st century CE will be parallel to the Gospels writing during their time, which would be about 30 to 40 years since Tacitus is writing around 108 AD and Nero's fire is happening around 70. And even Tacitus scholar, the respected Ronald Syme, points out it was not too late to question witnesses surviving the last years of Nero. So to hold the Gospels to a different standard would be fallacious. Since we can use the Gospels as sources for Jesus, it answers some important reasons for his crucifixion. One of the reasons for his crucifixion seems to be based on the high priest as the main instigators for Jesus' arrest and being delivered to the high priest before being delivered to Pilate. However, the elders and scribes were present at the deliverings, which would make sense if this is the case, and you can see it with the high priest and Pilate of Jesus and even during his arrest. Also, what's striking is regarding Jesus' trial and crucifixion is the Greco-Roman parallels we see with the Gospels that they're considered not historically reliable and considered something of historical merit. When it comes to Jesus being scourged and stripped by Roman soldiers, it's not considered unusual, as we see it's marked in Josephus and Livy and Cicero. Jesus being mocked and ridiculed as a king is not considered odd. We have examples in Philo, and E.P. Sanders gives some in his work Jesus and Judaism. Jesus being nailed to a cross by his hands and feet, while implied but not explicitly stated, is consistent with Roman procedures of crucifixion as well. That Jesus was crucified with two others is consistent with the crimes that would lead to crucifixion as well. And this, comparing Jesus to Johannan's archaeological find of a crucifixion in the AD 20s and Seneca's account previously mentioned, shows the varied methods used in this punishment. This is important for reliability, for if the Gospels entail non-historical information or fiction, then the overlap of the Gospels to Greco-Roman sources regarding Jesus' trial is quite surprising. And also, since Jesus' trial and crucifixion is most detailed in history, that is why it's used by ancient historians. This also puts Starz in a predicament, since he will either have to overturn the position on bias or historical reliability to the events, and if he argues anonymity, even if they were anonymous documents, they were still centralized in the area of the growing Christian movement and supported by multiple independent traditions, though I don't believe that they are anonymous. So Tacitus, while he's not infallible, he's regarded as the most reliable of the Roman historians surviving today. The famed classicist Arno Mamigliano noted he was a writer whose reliability cannot be seriously questioned. The majority view in academia as Tacitus knew his stuff, and it was a normality for him to follow ancient historiographical practices and stay true to accuracy. This also includes Tacitus's Annals. So his Annals writes, and I'll just highlight the portions to save time here, guys, that Christ had been executed in the reign of Tiberius by the procurator Pontius Pilate, and suppressed for a time the deadly superstition erupted again not only in Judea, the origin of Caesar, but also in the city of Rome. The single reference to Jesus as the Christ is sound and no good evidence for interpolation. The passage is considered on the majority as genuine. The only known interpolation is in regards to the Greek terms eta and iota and the word Christians, but this change occurred during the medieval times. So, some will argue Tacitus does not cite his exact source or sources from regarding the reference of Jesus and thus unreliable. But like many other ancient historians, Tacitus rarely uses specific sources. So unless one wants to grant all of those uncited Tacitine references as unreliable, which would be a head-on collision with actual historians in the field and their views on it, then it would be a case of special pleading thus fallacious to hold the Tacitus reference to Jesus or Josephus any differently. Indeed, the question of where is Tacitus getting his evidence from be better explained by the Senate archives, a criminal report of his death, or even documents from the priestly organization he was a part of. Josephus. He was a Roman Jewish historian during the 1st century AD, and the passage we were focused on is the TF, or called the Testimony Flavianum. The translation by William Whiston, also found in most to all manuscripts, considered doctored, and when the Christian interpolation evolved into it within 3 parts, he was the Christ, rose again, and the divine prophets foretold. The text with the alleged doctored elements is as such. I will go to the unabridged version just to save time here, since we're cutting back a little bit. You guys can see that in your own deal. It doesn't have much to do with what we're talking about. When the 3 components are removed, the accepted view is as so. At that their time appeared Jesus, a wise man, for he was a doer of startling deeds, a teacher of people who received the truth with pleasure, and he gained a following both among many Jews and among many of the Greek origin. And when Pilate, because of the accusation made by the leading men among us, condemned him to the cross, those who had loved him previously did not cease to do so. Up to this very day, the tribe of Christians had not died out. Tell me when I have 4 minutes. The majority position, what is the middle ground? What?
Yeah, I'll let you know.
Okay. Middle ground Jewish specialist Geza Vermes writes, declaring the whole notice of forgery would amount to throwing the baby with the bathwater. Indeed, in recent years, most of the experts, including myself, have adopted a middle course, accepting that part of the account is authentic. And the part of an authentic reference to the historical Jesus about crucifixion is found in all surviving manuscripts. So, the majority view is people like late James D.G. Dunn. There's a broad consensus among scholars regarding it. John P. Meyer finds it wholly fantasy to denote the entire passage as inauthentic. Even Josephus scholar Louis Feldman, who's considered the giant in the field, listed 87 discussions, and the majority was, when you remove the 3 components, it is in fact reliable. Also, Jewish scholar Geza Vermes notes declaring the whole notice a forgery would amount to throwing the baby with the bathwater. I gave that one. I guess I added it on accident. And also adding the list of authenticity would be Josephine scholars like Alice Wheatley and James Paget. So, scholars on Jesus' crucifixion. Professor Helen K. Bond writes that Jesus of Nazareth was crucified under Pontius Pilate, the fifth prefect of the imperial Roman province Judea, is one of the surest facts of Christianity. James D.G. Dunn writes, 2 facts in the life of Jesus command almost universal assent. They bracket the 3 years for which Jesus is most remembered, his life's work, his mission. One is Jesus' baptism by John, the other is his death by crucifixion. Because they rank so high on the almost impossible to doubt or deny scale of historical facts, they are obvious starting points for an attempt to clarify the what and why of Jesus' mission. Even New Testament professor of studies at Oxford, Christopher M. Tuckett writes, one of the indisputable facts about Jesus is that he was crucified. John Dominic Cross in the Jesus Seminar writes, slightest doubt about the fact of Jesus' crucifixion under Pontius Pilate, that he was crucified is as sure as any historical thing can ever be. Paula Fredrickson also writes, the single most solid fact about Jesus' life is his death. He was executed by the Roman prefect Pilate and on and around Passover in the manner Rome reserved particularly for political insurrectionists, namely crucifixion. Ehrman writes, one of the most certain facts of history is that Jesus was crucified on orders of the Roman prefect of Judea, Pontius Pilate. Vermes writes, the passion of Jesus is history. So, what does Starr have to accomplish today in order to win this debate? Based off what I have presented, he has to basically either destroy or limit and attack the following arguments. Regarding the Gospels, some overlap regarding Josephus and Tacitus. They were written during the height of historical intentionality, and the Gospels depict this sentiment. The Gospels having bias is not a negation towards their historical reliability, since you cannot escape it, and also it was a part of the writing process of iconistic elements. The Gospels, including Pauline epistles accepted by Ehrman, attested Jesus' crucifixion. The Gospels, including Tacitus and Josephus, written decades later, were also a part of the writing process and their understanding of contemporary, so also not a knock on their reliability. Jesus' crucifixion is consistent with Greco-Roman crucifixion
4
procedures
minutes.
as well. Thank you. This also includes the overlap presented of Greco-Roman execution methods and Jesus' crucifixion in the Gospels and other documents. Regarding Tacitus, the burden of proof is on the one claiming unreliability for the following reasons. There's no evidence of interpolation. It's found in all surviving manuscripts with no notable variations. Tacitus's Latin would be near impossible to imitate. Ancient writers did not cite their sources frequently like we do in modern times. If you were to argue this, then you run into a fallacy called presentism. The majority of scholars in the field agree that this is a reliable account by Tacitus. Regarding Josephus, the burden of proof is on the one claiming unreliability for the following reasons. Majority of scholarship with different methodologies have derived the same conclusion regarding its authenticity of a middle ground. Despite the obvious additions to the text of Josephus, the text of Jesus' crucifixion is sound and is found in all surviving manuscripts with no notable variations. So this concludes, and if the reports are true that Starz is talking about my family and my past history, it adds more to the fire, and thank you. How much time do I have left?
You have about 3
3
minutes.
minutes.
Fantastic. Okay, so since I gave you guys that, I've got a couple more things to bring up on my own merit. Thank you. So a couple points. One, he says the Gospels run off circularity. The problem is that if you go to a definition of a word, it's going to run into circularity. Ancient historical documents are not going to be any different. The Pauline epistles are written by Paul. We know this because he had his own amanuensis, a person to write for him, right? Paul influences the New Testament documents that are written. The New Testament documents are going to be influenced by Paul because by definition, New Testament documents are influenced by Paul. So Paul's going to be influenced by them. So you have this back and forth, and we see this with the Galatians, with Peter meeting up, with Paul meeting up with Peter and James. So circularity is a part of the historical process. There is no evidence for the idea that these early groups he's talking about, like the Basilidians and these groups, we'll get into it in the cross-examination at their first century. He won't be able to bring up a scholar if he does, not the proper methodology. Some gospels were politically shaped into the church, are politically shaped. Like, I don't know what they was doing there instead of historically shaped. That makes no sense. History wraps up political, religious, philosophical, sometimes theological, a whole bunch of different aspects by definition. So that just doesn't make any sense either. He said John was not found in earlier manuscripts, which off the top of my head, I don't know if that's true according to earlier witnesses. Earlier is not always better, but that's fallacious since common sense isn't always logical. But in short, if that was true, it has nothing to do with the crucifixion of Christ. And he also didn't mention anything of Josephus or Tacitus or actual arguments against them. So I argue him to challenge anything he brings forth now to bring a scholar in the methodology of the scholar to actually show something in this debate. That's it. Thank you.
All right, are you
You have 1 minute
calling
left. Do you want to state it?
Yeah, save it.
Alrighty.
All right, cool. All right, thank you, Bless. Now we're going to go into the rebuttal statement. So from this point, we will be doing it for 7 minutes. Stars, you'll have 7 minutes. Let me know when you're ready.
Oh, you fell right into my trap. Okay.
Are you ready?
Can you start? Yeah.
All right, 7 minutes is on the clock.
All right, you absolute. Okay, so you said right that So first you said that I said that John. You said that I said that John isn't found in early manuscripts. I was only talking about a forged verse, right? I was talking about forged verses in the Gospels that are added in later, which make them untrustworthy, right? You didn't refute the So we have forged, and yes, you brought up Paul, but Paul wasn't there, so I don't care. And you said you want evidence of early Christians groups who denied the crucifixion. We have the Basilians, and a first century scholar and his followers believed that Jesus was not crucified. They held that someone else was substituted in his place and just ascended to ascended to heaven unharmed, right? Um. So hold up. Let me get this real quick. You're done. You're done, Zo. How much time do I have left?
5 minutes and 40 seconds.
Yeah, I also gave you 3 Christian scholars where the New Testament was so unreliable that they ended up apostating, right? You said that you attacked my argument on saying that the New Testament is circular reasoning, but the
Are you there? Starts.
You have 5 minutes left. Oh, do we lose him?
I think we might have. Starts. Can you hear us?
We'll go ahead and pause it.
Sure. We'll give him a minute here to reconnect. He might have lost
Yeah.
internet.
I keep accidentally leaving. It keeps making me leave.
Okay, you're all good. All right.
Are you ready to resume?
You ready to continue?
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, so
resuming at 4 minutes and 47 seconds.
nothing you can do. Again, if it appeared to everybody that Jesus was crucified, we expect it to be dictated in history that he was crucified. So whether it was an illusion from Allah or someone took his place, it would all be recorded the same way. So you saying that, the Bart Ehrman said this, or this scholar said that the crucifixion is as historical as it could possibly be. That helps my point because it appeared to them that he was crucified, so it is recorded in history that he was crucified. So that works in my favor. And again, me giving you reasons why the crucifixion didn't happen also works in my favor. That's why I said be my guest, because now you just strengthened the Islamic narrative. Dude, what are you doing? Just quit, man. And again, Tacitus wasn't an eyewitness. Why are you using Tacitus? I don't care if he was Roman. He wasn't an eyewitness. Josephus. Yo, bless. Can you please pull up that thing that you showed up? That things I have to
That's
refute.
cross exam. This is your time.
Yeah, this is your time to
Yeah.
get into the cross.
Hey.
Make sure you can ask him for stuff.
Yeah, Paul wasn't there. And again, you saying what you said that the crucifixion, right? It is circular reasoning. Yeah, it is circular. And the Bible's been corrupted. Yeah. Yeah. The Bible's been corrupted. And yeah, you can't refute the Islamic narrative.
3
You
minutes
got
left.
on me about bringing up Dan McClellan, but Dan McClellan is he has a PhD in theology and religious studies. He's a supervisor for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. He believes in the crucifixion, yet he agrees there's no archaeological evidence for it. So nothing you said there refuted anything I said. You just said, okay, historians agree on the crucifixion. Okay, it appeared so that he was crucified, so it's recorded in history that he was crucified. Okay, so what? And there's no archaeological evidence for the crucifixion. You couldn't refute that. What about, and you asked me to bring up scholars, what about the scholars who apostated because of the unreliability and the corruption of the New Testament, huh? What about that? How do you explain that? And again, I have a question to you that you can't answer. Why do historical records outside of the Bible provide little or no direct evidence of Jesus' crucifixion? Especially when the Bible is unreliable and has been corrupted. I gave you the forged verses, right? I gave you the forged verses, right? I gave you the forged verses. I gave you the gospels copying from each other and the contradictions. You didn't refute any of that. You said a whole lot of nothing, brother. No offense. No offense, blessed. But I mean, I won. And I feel bad for you, man. And I really feel bad. I really feel bad. Yeah. Yeah. Let's go. All right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Um, yeah. Matthew 16:16-17. Forged. Uh-huh. It's forged. And the Bible has been corrupted. You know, the Council of
1
Nicaea
minute
was
remaining.
3 centuries after Jesus and was convened because of significant theological disagreements within early Christianity. Uh-huh. You didn't know about that, did you, huh? Yeah, look at him. He's shocked. You didn't know about that, huh? You didn't know about that. Yeah. And guess what? They were fishing for information to see fabrication and deception. Oh, you want evidence? Oh, shoot. I'm supposed to give evidence that the early. Wait, I already did. Did I? I'm not
30
sure if I
seconds
gave evidence that
remaining.
early Christian groups denied the crucifixion. We can get into that in the cross examinations. You're going to lose, man. And yeah, I've already won the debate, but yeah. Yeah. Uh huh. Yeah. Yeah. Uh huh. Uh huh. I won. I won the debate. Let's go. I won.
That is time.
All right, that's time. All right. Thank you very much, Stars Bless. You have 7 minutes. Let me know when you're ready.
Okay, everyone,
All right.
we're going to have a wonderful learning lesson today. Learning with Blessed, good old Blessed. I got a lot of notes here. We got a lot to get through. We're going to get through it together. Now, I don't know what that dude is smoking, but it's nothing I've ever had. But I can tell you right now, yelling you've won a debate has nothing to do with winning the debate. We're trying to teach this younger guy how it means to properly debate. And so we're hoping he learns things from this. And maybe you guys learned something from this as well. I gave out the presentation. And that's the main goal here. But we're going to go through some of these different points that he's made. He argued that the Islamic narrative is more reliable for sayings of Jesus being crucified. This makes no sense considering obviously they deny it. The problem is he's saying that using Tacitus Josephus would help his case. No, it doesn't. All that means is you redefined a historical event. You've redefined an event where it says a man was crucified to it being a supernatural event. This is why when Muslims try to compare the resurrection to the crucifixion, someone being crucified in suspension is a naturalistic event. God is not needing to be ordained or involved into that event. Somebody rising from the dead, that is where God would be involved. So him arguing that the Muslim narrative is correct, historically you'd have to take a 600-year-old document and then redefine the interpretation of the historical event in the first century of Jesus And historically, that just doesn't fly. The resurrection in a comparison to event, not historically attested. Yeah, that's like weirdly fallacious. And also, you keep mentioning the resurrection's got nothing to do with this debate. We could do a debate on the resurrection, but I think after this debate, you're probably going to be out of here at the end of this thing. Let's see. The circular reasoning, we already went through that. You didn't really answer much of that. You didn't touch Tacitus or Josephus with a 10-foot pole again, or none of my arguments against it. Another one, you keep shouting archaeological evidence for Jesus' crucifixion. Well, yeah, with all due respect, you're not going to find archaeological evidence of a crucifixion. You're going to find it found in documents like Josephus, Tacitus, Livy, Cicero, and others, where it's going to be documented in the writings of how crucifixion was done and the process behind it. If you were to read a little bit by Martin Hengel or others on what crucifixion was, you'd have understood that, or that fancy book I was telling you about by Woodrow Michael Kroll. But, you didn't care to notice. The Gospels contradict, therefore, ergo, they're unreliable sources. Yeah, I mean, so for example, the Catholic position, I think the EOs hold to the same thing. So the apostolic positioning, and also quite a few Protestant camps agree to a position of inerrancy, where when it comes to the words of God and those things, they are theologically given. And when it comes to certain minor things like historical errors, like did they take two staffs or one staff, yeah, there could be a minor contradiction. It has nothing to do with the ultimate message of what God is doing and the kingdom he's bringing up. So this is not an argument against anything. And also a majority of documents in antiquity are, well, all of them are not infallible documents. They have errors in them, including your Quran. But this isn't a debate about that, but it's not an argument against the Gospels. Again, I'm not an inerrantist, kind of point that out. Secondary sources are not reliable. I don't understand what you meant by that. Maybe you can answer what you mean by that. Then the three you mentioned that were Christian scholars, John Shelby Spong, Richard Carrier, Robert Price. Richard Carrier believes that it's more reliable that Christ was crucified in outer space and something to do with sperm cells. Robert Price doesn't believe Jesus existed and was never accepted into a teaching institution, never also with Richard Carrier, even though Richard Carrier has the credentials to be a good scholar. And John Shelby Spong was gay, and he was an Episcopalian priest, didn't have a single degree in biblical studies, even though you said he was a scholar. And on top of that, what's worse is he argued against those positions, and you can look them up. And they weren't good, and they never held any water. Again, you didn't give anything about the Basilidians, and I argued multiple times to give me a scholar to back this up. You will not be able to because it doesn't exist to give their actual methodology that makes sense historically. And also the Gospels copying each other. Well, no, duh, they're biographies. Biographies by definition rely on prior information. We have understanding of biographers that knew the biography. And even there, we have examples of showing they would take other persons' positions or views, even though they're involved in that event. So Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John borrowing from each other is not a problem because they also have their own independent attested information. Like Q, for example, and also like you have special M, special L, the sign source for John, and then Mark is kind of his own different flurry of things since he's the interpreter to Peter. And we also see that in the Greek. What would you say?
2 minutes.
Oh, I'm about done almost. Fantastic. Let's see. He says that the Gospels are collusion since they have like some borrowing going on. Well, we just answered the question again, so those 2 points amount to nothing. And then let's see here. Yeah, you said that Jesus being crucified, if it happened, would be historically attested. Yeah, that's what the New Testament has done, and Tacitus and Josephus, and probably other writings outside of that we're not speaking about today, in multiple attested ways and in independent traditions, way before this idea that Jesus wasn't crucified popped up on the map. You're following Gnostic ideals. It's an old story. This is why historians don't take it seriously. That's it.
All right, are you done?
You have a minute left if you want to seed it.
No, concede it.
Okay.
All right.
All right, so I think that's it for rebuttals. If you guys are ready, we're going to move on to the cross-examination section. So here we're going to be giving each side, starting with starts 20 minutes for cross-examination. I just want to preface this by letting everyone know cross-examination belongs to the person whose turn it is. So beginning with starts, They are allowed to talk over each other. If they want to interrupt each other, guide the conversation, tell someone stop, I'm moving on to the next subject. That's perfectly fine. That's how cross-examination works. It's
The
not
one
rude.
the one thing I will say, if we can both agree with me and starts, we have to allow each other, let's say, like 20 seconds to finish the sentence because you don't want to keep cutting somebody off.
Starts, are you okay with that?
That's 60 questions if you do
One.
the math.
Yep.
I won.
All
What was
right.
that?
Are you
I'm so
are you
sorry, I
okay
didn't
with that,
Starts, are
Starch?
you okay with committing that if you ask a question, you have to allow them at least 20 seconds to respond before you cut them off?
Can we make that like 3 seconds to respond?
No. No, you got to give them time to respond.
All right.
So don't
Okay.
like cut them
15.
off.
Yeah. I agree.
Okay,
Okay.
cool. So 20 minutes, and the time belongs to you, Starts. Whenever you start talking, we can start the timer.
Go ahead and cross
I'm
examine.
ready.
All right. Let me know when you're ready.
As you start talking.
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right. Timer starts now.
All right, bless. So, you said that the crucifixion is actually very you said that it's realistic because of certain reasons, like other people, like of Jesus getting arrested and stuff like that. You agree it's realistic, right? And it's not miraculous. Well, guess what? There's something called realistic fiction. So a book can be realistic, but it's also fiction. So just because it's realistic doesn't mean it's happened.
Is there a
So try
question in here?
wait. So
You didn't. There wasn't a question.
okay. I got you a question. So how come other first century events have archaeological evidence to support them, but the most verifiable fact in ancient history, according to you, doesn't?
Okay, great. Because I already showed and I said in my opening, I think it was in my cross rebuttal period, that I said, like Martin Hengel and Woodrow Michael Kroll and other studies you're to read on crucifixion in Roman times, a archaeological source is not expected.
But for other first
Even
century
even
events,
when you walk away from Jesus.
uh-huh. Can I refute his answer, or do I have to ask another question?
No, you got this is 20 minutes. You guys do whatever you need.
Yeah, you just can't
Yeah,
monologue.
no,
You gotta ask questions.
no. You know, there are other first century events that have but how can this be the most verifiable fact in ancient history with no archaeological evidence to back it up, other than the corrupted New Testament?
So great question. But I deny saying that
Uh-huh.
the New Testament is corrupted. So for example, we only have one showing of a surviving crucified victim as an archaeological find named Johanna. But we know conservative estimates, we know during that period around 20,000 Jews were crucified under Rome. So that means the absolute vast majority of people that were crucified are not going to be found, their bones or an archaeological finding like that. On top of that, we know we wouldn't expect it with Jesus because Jesus during the 30s to 33 AD, the Christian movement was only about 100 people, maybe a little bit more than that in the population of that group, compared to the Roman province of Jews, for example, was at a conservative estimate of 1 million. So they weren't a big group. They were not known.
Okay, then.
So we wouldn't expect it.
Okay, but Jesus, wait. Jesus, right, is the most known person to be crucified, but we have no archaeological evidence for him. But we have archaeological evidence for Yehohana.
Correct. As I stated twice now, because we wouldn't expect it when we see ancient Roman procedures, because Jesus would not have been known in that way to like be revered, to have his bones kept like that. That makes no sense.
Okay, then why believe Jesus was crucified? Absence of evidence is evidence of absence.
No, it's not. That's fallacious.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. If I say there's a flying spaghetti monster, but there's no evidence of it, are you gonna believe it now?
Well, obviously, if you can't promote any positive evidence for a flying spaghetti monster.
Well, there's
But
no
if
good
there's
evidence
like, for example, if there's like a pre-tradition of like, we know that there are invisible, like weird deities that exist that are odd, like a flying spaghetti monster, like the pasta monster or something, it's not out of the realm of possibility the flying spaghetti monster exists. if it's invisible.
True, but there's evidence for absence when the
Okay, then
evidence
you just
isn't good.
agreed to the critique you just brought towards me. Thank you. Please move. Please continue.
Wait. Okay. Dude, you got smoked there. But um, why are there no there barely there are no historical records outside of the Bible for direct evidence of Jesus' crucifixion? And I don't believe in the Bible. So why should somebody believe in the crucifixion if they don't believe in the New Testament? And how is this not
Well-
circular reasoning?
So for example, I'll play with your weird criterion there. We could get to the crucifixion. One, you haven't given a good argument against the New Testament. That's not your question. You just keep saying it's corrupted. But the interesting part is when you look at Tacitus,
I gave you contradictions.
when you look at Tacitus and you can think that when you look at Tacitus and Josephus, what's fascinating about them is that, as I mentioned, what it means by contemporary, that accounts were normally written decades later when it came to ancient antiquity. That was the writing procedure done at the time. One of the reasons was done because they wanted all the ideas to develop. Because, for example, the earliest account is not always the best account, right? And so I gave an example of Titanic earlier today. If you're curious about that, I'll break it down for you. But the Titanic gives us a great example of that with first century witness. So the same thing would apply here. The earliest would not always necessarily be the best. So
But the earliest, wait. But
10 minutes.
the secondhand sources are taking from firsthand sources. You don't have a secondhand source without a firsthand source. So how can
right,
Tacitus
and that's what
be reliable if they're taking from an unreliable firsthand source? And how is this
well,
firsthand source reliable?
the onus would be on the one to show if they're unreliable, considering, and I'm not questioning you, so I'm not being fallacious. The onus would be on the one to say they're unreliable since they properly follow ancient historiographical procedures, especially in these writings and in these passages. So you'd have to have a scholar or something to rival against that. Also, yeah, I mean, that'd be the big critique there. I think there was another question in there because there's 2 points you raised indirectly.
Why are the New Testament Gospels reliable?
Why aren't they? Well, that's just begging the question.
Why
I would
are they?
disagree. I say that they are. Why are they reliable? Great.
Why are they?
I mentioned a few. I mentioned a few different reasons. If you remember my opening, I can pull them up for you. Actually, I can list them off. The Gospels are written during the height of historical intentionality, and the Gospels depict the sentiment. The Gospels having bias is not a negation towards their historical reliability, since you can't escape it. And also, it was a part of the writing process of economistic elements. Also, to add your thing earlier, saying that they could be like historical novels. Historical novels had certain particular tendencies found in them. One of them was like a romance, where it had a sexual tendency within the writing. I can give you Keener and others on that point in classes as sonnet. So you just tells me you understand what a historical novel is in antiquity. You just think it's something like a Spider-Man from New York book in modern time. But also the Gospels, including the Pauline epistles, accepted by Rome and others, attest to the crucifixion. The Gospels included Jesus and Josephus, written decades later, also part of the writing process, and their understanding of contemporary also is not a knock on their historical reliability. And also Jesus' crucifixion is consistent with Greco-Roman writings. When we see outside the New Testament, they match up with what we see with the New Testament. So there's
Do they date
overlap
back
as
to the
well with
first century?
consistency for liability.
Do they date back to the first century?
Josephus
Nobody.
and Tacitus are first century. Are part.
Wait.
Josephus is writing first century for sure. Tacitus is writing late first century, early second century, because his writing split up because
Hey,
they're books.
okay. So we both agree that it is historically accepted that Jesus was crucified. But the first-hand accounts like Matthew and Mark and Mary Magdalene, the mother of James and Joseph, according to your Bible, Matthew 27:55 to 56 and Mark 15:40 to 41, it mentions that majority of the people that witnessed the crucifixion were watching from a distance. Further supporting the Islamic narrative that it appeared so, because it's easier for something to appear to me that it's
I need a
happening.
question.
Yeah, I'm gonna get to a question. So, how can you trust eyewitness accounts that were watching from a distance, and how does this not help the Islamic narrative?
One, this contradicts earlier when you said
Ah.
earlier in the debate that the Gospels were eyewitness accounts to the crucifixion. So I'm glad you changed that.
No. That was a If they are, then they're
That was
watching
a
from a different.
mistake. You just didn't get it. But what was, because you said, why should I not trust eyewitness accounts?
No. Okay. According to the Bible, let's grant that they are eyewitness accounts. They were watching
Okay.
from a distance, so it helps the
Yeah.
idea that it appears
Well,
to them.
John wasn't.
Huh?
Well, John and the women weren't. Like Mary, I think there was another woman with her. They
Did
were
you know
actually at
Mary
the
didn't
crucifixion.
recognize?
They watched.
Did you? Is the question? Did you know Mary didn't even recognize Jesus
You
at
know,
first?
that's like later on when it comes to his resurrection, and that has nothing to do with the crucifixion. So why are you talking about them? Let's get
No,
back to the
it's
subject.
also,
No, it regards the empty tomb and the appearance of Jesus as nothing to do with the crucifixion of Christ. That's way after. Get back on subject.
well, no crucifixion, no resurrection, right?
I hope you know people are recording this debate. I'm not doing it, but unfortunately other people are. So you really need to get it in gear.
I feel like I'm winning, man.
Hey, fine. Ask me questions
Okay.
because you're not
Why
winning the
should I
cross
trust? Why should
examination.
I
You're not
trust?
asking me questions.
You have 10 minutes.
There's 10 minutes
Okay.
remaining.
Dear God.
Um, dude,
Ask me a
like
question. I'm here.
you brought up how my three scholars are unreliable, but they're still scholars, right?
Correct, but they've shown no good expertise in the field that they're talking about, especially with Jesus' crucifixion. They're
Are
not
you a
accepted.
biblical scholar? Are you a biblical scholar?
No, I'm not a biblical scholar. That's why I refer to other biblical scholars.
Okay. What about most like Dan McClellan?
What about him? Dan
He
McClellan agrees
agrees.
Jesus was crucified historically.
Yeah, and he also says that there's no evidence for it.
He doesn't. I know he doesn't say that.
He said there's no Can I show you a video? Right
There's
now?
no archaeological evidence, but I said 4 times now. This is why you need to understand how debates work. You can't just keep hammering a point. It doesn't work like that. This is the 4th time I've said we were not going to expect and don't expect any archaeological evidence for a crucifixion in the 1st century. We have one example, Yohanan, and a conservative estimate of Jews being crucified around 20,000.
You don't have proof that it's Jesus, and you're saying because first century won't have archaeological evidence, but I've already given you other first century events that have archaeological evidence. How can the crucifixion be the most verifiable fact in nation history when other first century events record? Wait, there's archaeological evidence for them. I can list them all to you.
I'm sorry. I was watching. Somebody sent me a message. Could you please repeat that?
Are you serious, bro?
They can
Okay.
pause the time for like 10, 12 seconds. That's fine. You can give them 10, 12 seconds.
No, it's good.
That's fine.
It's good.
I'm
I'm
not
gonna win
trying to be
anyway.
rude. Somebody sent me a message. My mom went sideways.
You're good. You're good. Hey, you're good. We gotta make mistakes.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
You know, so how can the crucifixion be the most verifiable fact in ancient history when there's no archaeological evidence for it, and there are many, many, many other first century events that have archaeological evidence for them? Bam! Huh? How do you explain that?
Because I already said we wouldn't expect archaeological evidence for a crucifixion. So to hold it to that standard would be fallacious.
But I have to hold it to that standard if you want me to believe it's the most verifiable fact in ancient history.
Then holding to fallacy.
According to these scholars that you're quoting, according to these scholars that you're quoting, they think that it's the most verifiable fact in ancient history, but they're obviously lying when there's no archaeological evidence for the crucifixion and other first century events have it.
So I'm going to keep saying the same thing I'm going to say. And I'm going to need you to, either accept that, we'll keep going in circles, and move on
You
to
need to
something
understand
else.
my question. You need to
I've
understand my
understood it and
question.
I've answered it. I've answered
Okay,
it
but
quite
you
a
didn't
bit.
answer. Wait. You said, wait, all you said was we don't expect archaeological evidence for a first century event. Okay, perfect. That doesn't disprove it. How can it be the most verifiable fact in ancient history when there's no archaeological evidence for it when other um first century events have archaeological evidence, yet the crucifixion doesn't?
Because by definition, we're not going to expect archaeological evidence for a crucifixion. I've already said this.
then how
And I
can a
gave the reason why.
crucifixion? Then how can okay? I'm not. How can a crucifixion be the most verifiable fact in ancient history? Then any crucifixion.
Because because it follows certain historical criterions. It's multiply attested, it's early, on top of its reliability, and also it's got independent traditions verifying.
The reign of Emperor Augustus has archaeological evidence, but you're saying that the crucifixion is more reliable than that?
Yeah, well, Octavius Augustus was a Roman emperor who had his head mounted on a coin, and he was of high status, so he's going to be remembered in that manner. Jesus was a lowly Jew that had a movement that only lasted 3 years, with the population of the Christians around 100 plus people.
That's what I'm
around.
saying. So, do you believe that the crucifixion is the most verifiable fact in ancient history?
I didn't hold to that standard. I never once said that was the
Okay,
case.
but
You're
no,
running
but the
off one
scholars
of
you
the
quoted-
scholars I mentioned.
Yeah, the scholars you quoted agree with that. So you
No,
disagree with
one
the scholars you
scholar.
quoted?
One scholar
Yeah?
said that they took it so far to say it's as historical as anything could ever be. James D.G. Dunn was the other one that said that when you're talking about two of the major facts that cannot
5
be
minutes.
explained away historically, is going to be Jesus' relationship with John the Baptist, and two, by the River Jordan, and two is going to do with Jesus' crucifixion. So you
How can
just
you
read,
refute
you
the
just
fact-
heard wrong.
How can you refute the fact that if it appeared to them that he was crucified, we expect it to be dictated in history that he was crucified? You're saying that we're changing historical events, but I was arguing that the Islamic narrative is more logical than the Christian narrative, which is the most popular narrative, not the historical narrative. So how can you say that Islam is changing an event in history when I said if it appeared to them that he was
Yeah,
crucified?
I mean,
Therefore,
yeah, right. Because saying he appeared to them crucified would mean that there was a supernatural entity that was involved, or a twin brother, or something like that, right? So it re-changes what Tacitus, Josephus, the Gospels, and pre-New Testament traditions say about what happened to Jesus, that he was actually crucified on a cross, and he was actually buried in a tomb.
exactly.
No, that
But if
doesn't go
it's an
towards your
illusion,
position.
wait, no. If it's yes, it does, because let's say it's an illusion from Allah, it's going to be recorded that way. If the God, if it was to say, look, Jesus was not it didn't appear to them that Jesus was crucified, right? And it says that he was crucified, then it would contradict history. But because it says the exact opposite of that, it doesn't.
So we went through this not even last
But you
week.
didn't refute
I'm
anything.
surprised you're still using the argument. No, it's been refuted, but I can answer it again. What you have to do
Yeah,
is,
because that day.
when you look at Tacitus,
Sorry.
Josephus, in the New Testament, they all state and they say that Jesus was crucified historically under Pontius Pilate, right, by the procurator Pontius Pilate, on a cross, right? And then you have the 4th century Epistle of Barnabas and a 6th to 7th century Quranic text claiming that Christ wasn't crucified, but was appeared to be so. Okay, those are in contradiction, because when you ask the question, was Christ crucified on the cross, yes or no, it's one or the other. So either Tacitus, Josephus, and the Gospels and New Testament are right, or they're wrong. Or the Epistle of
Well, guess what?
Barnabas and the Muslims are right, or they're wrong. Well, historically, they're
But guess what?
wrong.
Tacitus and Josephus weren't there. And also, when I talk about the okay, let's grant that it was an illusion from Allah. With Tacitus, Josephus, the New Testament, all those people, would they agree that he was crucified if it was an illusion from Allah?
No, I don't grant that. That's just dumb.
Why? No. If Jesus, right? Let's say it was an illusion from Allah, and yes, that it looked to them an illusion from Allah that Jesus was crucified. You're saying it wouldn't be recorded in history by Tacitus, Josephus, and all those Christians that he was crucified?
No, the problem is the burden of proof would be on you
Yes
to
or no?
overturn.
Yes or no?
Restate
Yes or
the
no?
question. It was a weird. It seemed like you just had like a thought
Okay.
pattern. And you just came
Nah,
with a
you
question.
understand my
So
question.
rephrase it.
Just
No, I
repeat it.
don't. I want you to
If-
rephrase it.
Okay, no. If it was an illusion from Allah. And it
Okay.
looked exactly like Jesus who was crucified. If it was an illusion from Allah, which a lot of Muslims believe, right? Would all those people agree that he was crucified? Wouldn't it be recorded in history that he was crucified? Because the burden of proof is on you to disprove the Islamic narrative, but you can't do that. Because if it was an illusion from Allah, it would be recorded in history. If it was an illusion from Allah on the cross and they all saw him
So,
crucified,
where's the question?
it's an illusion.
Because you said there were proof only.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't agree with that. Where's the?
If it was an illusion from Allah that Jesus was crucified,
Okay.
would we expect it to be dictated in history that he was crucified by Tacitus Josephus, even though he wasn't? Yes or no?
If they were like early first century sources, then yeah, that would show this kind of idea. The problem is there's
Can you
no
prove my
competing
point?
tradition. No, I haven't, because
Can you
as
prove
I'm
my point?
saying, there's no early first
20
century
seconds left.
attested showings of saying that Christ was an illusion and not put up on the cross. So again, in order to
Well, how would they know
show
that?
a good
How would they
hypothesis,
know
you'd
that if it
have
was
to
an illusion?
refute Tacitus Josephus and the New Testament.
How would they know that if it was a physical illusion that looked exactly to them? How would they know that it was an
Time.
illusion?
There we go.
That
Allah
is
is all
time.
powerful.
All right, that is time. Bless. I'll give you the final statement to answer that question.
I just restated the same thing, and my answer is the same.
All
Of
right.
course, if you add a hypothesis, that's going to say like, well, it's made to appear, but it wasn't so, like in reality, but it looks like so. Of course, it's going to be part of the hypothesis. The problem is it doesn't rival anything to say yours is grandiose. The argument would be to say that the 600-plus-year-old Quranic texts are historically
My
more
point is,
accepted than
you
the
can't
Gospels.
refute.
All
My
right.
point is, you
That-
can't
That's
refute the
true.
Islamic
This,
narrative.
of course, can
that-
be. This
can-
leads
that
this
was
leads
the
us
end of
into
that.
time for his cross reference.
All right. So, Stars, you can go ahead and make your closing statement if you have 7 minutes.
Wait, what about my cross
No, he
examination?
gets cross
What
exam.
the fluff
Yeah,
is
but
this?
Blessed gets.
Oh, I'm sorry.
20 minutes.
You gonna let
I'm
me have my
sorry.
fun?
All right, go ahead.
So
Oh boy.
rude. I'm gonna take a drink.
Okay.
We can start the timer when you start talking.
Dude, I gotta answer some nonsense questions now. Oh boy.
And Stars, if he asks a question, it goes over. I'll give you the final word to answer that question.
Hmm. Mhm.
Wait. He conceded to more things than I've conceded to. So does that mean I won?
We
No.
don't
Yeah.
determine who wins. There's going.
You're not even
we'll talk
close there
we'll
yet.
talk about that at the Q&A.
Yeah. All
You
right.
conceded to contradictions and you conceded to
This isn't your time
when
to
we
make
get
an argument.
Okay, so here we go.
all right, here we go. And
So,
the timer
since the
starts now.
Gospels were written during the height of historical intentionality, and they depict this, and including a bias doesn't necessarily matter, and this also includes the Pauline epistles, and they all attest Jesus' crucifixion. Why can you not accept them historically? Like, what evidence is to the contrary? Since we've agreed they're going to have contradictions in
Okay.
these things when it comes to the attestation of Jesus' crucifixion. And can you give me a scholar to back that?
So the reason why you can't trust the crucifixion, and well, you can't trust what the Gospels say because of the forged verses. And if you want a scholar to back that the Gospels have forged verses, hold up.
Let's
Give
say
me-
a grant. Let's say like Mark 16:9-20 had grant with you, right? So let's break this down. Do you what argument do you have if you disagree against like Keener and
You want a
Burridge
scholar?
and others on the
You wanted scholars? I
Gospels
got
being
you.
written during the
Bart
height of
Ehrman.
historical intentionality? Hey, I'm not done.
Mm-hmm. My bad.
What scholars do you have saying that the Gospels are not written during the period of historical intentionality, or do you agree that they are written during the period of historical intentionality?
Oh.
Yes or no? I need
They
yes or no.
weren't.
They were not?
They weren't.
Okay, give me a scholar in the next 15 seconds that says that and give me the source. Who do you have?
I can give you an
Who's
Islamic scholar. With that.
ChatGPTing it? That doesn't
No,
help
I'm
me. I
not.
need a biblical scholar.
Bart Ehrman. There.
We heard you, Tide. Okay, can you give me exactly what he's quoting? What he's saying?
Um, Bart Ehrman is a prominent scholar of early Christianity,
No, that's not
and
what
he
I
agrees with
said. You know what I said. You better answer these
What did you
questions. It's
say?
looking bad. I asked you very
Dude,
carefully. I said, you mentioned Bart Ehrman. Can you give me the quotation by Ehrman?
okay, Bart Ehrman once said that I don't remember the quote off the top of my head, but he was in
Do
the
you agree Bart Ehrman? Okay, let me. Do you agree Bart Ehrman agrees that that Jesus was crucified? Yes or no?
yeah, he agrees Jesus was crucified. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. We'll move on to the next thing. The
No. But let
Gospels,
me.
including no, it doesn't work that way. It's my cross
My no,
examination.
my point was the gospel are
Yeah, I asked
unreliable.
you yes or
You
no.
asked
You don't under.
for
Hey,
proof that the
time
gospels
out,
were
time
unreliable.
out.
Now you're
No,
running because
that's
I
not
have
how
an
this
answer to
works.
you.
I'm not running. I asked
You're
you a
running because I
simple
have an answer to
question.
you.
I said about Bart Ehrman.
Let me.
That's done. We're moving on. So, let's see. Do you agree that Jesus' crucifixion is consistent with Greco-Roman crucifixion procedures?
It's realistic fiction. Yeah, but it's realistic fiction. So,
Okay, what evidence do you have it's realistic fiction instead of Greco-Roman biography?
um, the the sources that it takes from are unreliable. The first-hand sources are unreliable. I can give you. I've
Let's
shown
say
you've
even there were
conceded to.
parts that were unreliable in these
No, let me
sources.
finish.
Where
Let me
does it
finish.
get you to
No,
say it's realistic fiction?
wait. So it can be. So you've conceded to the fact that there are contradictions. You conceded that they copied off each other. Um, Now you have the forged verses, which makes the gospels untrustworthy. And you and I can both agree that the gospels are the number one thing that scholars use to verify the crucifixion as a historical fact. But once you prove that the New Testament is unreliable, you then make you
Oh no, we're not on Tacitus
demonstrate that the
Josephus
New
yet. We'll get there.
Testament is unreliable. And
I
I don't
asked you
care
a
about
very simple
Tacitus.
question. You're ranting again.
And I
Is Jesus'
answered it.
crucifixion
And I answered
consistent
it.
with Greco-Roman crucifixion procedures? Yes or no?
I said yeah, and I gave you a but.
Well, I don't care about the but. You said yes. Fantastic. We're
Do the
moving
cross
on.
examination.
Next
This is the
question.
cross.
Yeah, we're doing cross-examination. I haven't asked you a question yet.
Wait, I didn't give you. Wait.
Um,
I was fair. I let you.
hey,
Get
okay,
the
pause
rebuttal.
the time, bro. What's going on here? I know he's younger, but come on.
You can pause it.
Or
Yeah, so remember,
you have to
this is
answer
cross
questions.
examination. You answer questions. This is Bless's time, right? So you should answer his questions. He controls the
Can I refute
conversation
his
right now,
questions?
but only
Because he's
to
gonna
the
make me.
extent he allows you. If he's allowed to talk over you, that's the nature of cross examination. So if he wants to talk over you, that's perfectly acceptable in this
That's not
portion.
fair.
I will
Come on,
give you. I will
That's how
give
this.
you time
It's okay.
starts. And don't start the time yet. I will give you time starts, but if I give you a yes or no, you got to answer the yes or no. I had to do it against
Okay.
Abdulaziz.
Oh,
Bite the bullet.
okay. Wait. What about? Oh, I forgot about the 20 seconds. What about the 20 seconds I have to answer? Right.
Yeah, it doesn't take 20 seconds for a yes or no. Okay. Anyway, we're back on. So,
All right, we're back.
what is your evidence that literalistic fiction was a first century genre during the composition of the Gospels? And give me a scholar to back this, please. There's your 20 seconds.
So we have. Wait, how does this apply to the Gospels? We have the forged verses, the
No, that's not what I asked you. I'll restate. I said, what evidence do you have that literalistic fiction was a genre in the first century?
What
And
evidence
give me
do
a
I have
scholar
that
to back
realistic
it.
fiction?
Yeah, and give me a scholar to back it.
Um,
You don't have an answer. That's fine.
but there are other works like the Philo of Alexandria, um, the Gospel of Mark,
Philo of
the
Alexandria is an author, not a writing.
huh? Well, they also I don't know, man.
Okay, so you just want to admit you don't know? That's fine. Okay, we'll move away from that point.
I
So
could have answered that.
we'll go to Tacitus a little bit. So why do you not think Tacitus is reliable? Just give me like, let me ask you this. Do you think Tacitus is, um, oh man, how do I want to frame this?
Ooh, dude, you want to
Okay,
get stay away
why
from
do you
Tacitus?
think
No,
Tacitus, what's up?
dude, be careful with Tacitus, because I'll destroy you on that.
Okay, well, we'll see. Do you agree Tacitus has no evidence of interpolations in the manuscripts?
I agree it's unreliable. He's unreliable.
What evidence do you have he's unreliable, and give me scholars to back it? Give me Tacitian experts to back it right now. If not, then your point amounts to nothing, because when talking about people in the field that know what they're doing, instead of good old blessed day and starch trying to make arguments, because one
Right?
studied this a lot more than
Richard
you.
Carrier.
Carrier isn't a
Richard
Tacitian
Carrier.
scholar.
Okay, Mary Beard,
What?
Robert K. Shirk, Edward Champling, and I'm gonna give you reasons why
R-
Tacitus is unreliable.
Wait.
Bias.
Time out. Wait, Ann, roll back. I know you're using ChatGPT. This is sad, but I need you to you're running off
I'm
different
not.
names. Richard
Okay.
Carrier is not a
So I'm
Tacitian
gonna give you why.
expert. Do you know what a Tacitian? No, let me
Uh,
ask you this. Do you know what a Tacitian scholar is?
yeah.
Okay, what's a Tacitian scholar? What credentials do you need to be a Tacitian scholar?
A Tacitian scholar is a scholar who specializes in the study of the works of the Roman historian Tacitus.
Okay, by what what degrees?
What?
What degree do you have to get?
To be a Tacitinian scholar? I don't know, but this doesn't prove nor disprove the
Yeah,
resurrection.
all right. Yeah, it just tells me you don't know what you're talking about.
You're-
Um,
No, you're running
so
from why Tacitus is unreliable. You asked me why
I'm not
Tacitus is
running. It's my
unreliable.
cross-examination, and
Let
you
me
need to
let me
stop.
answer why he's unreliable. Now you won't let me answer that. You're running.
I'm not running. Okay, why is Tacitus
Let me answer why
unreliable
he's
in the
unreliable.
Annals? In the Annals, why is he unreliable?
Okay.
Go for it.
So bias. Tacitus often he explained disdain for certain
Okay, time
emperors
out.
like
What
Nero.
evidence do you? All right, great. But the bias thing. What evidence do you have that I showed earlier when I said that bias was a part of the writing procedure that you're going to say bias is a negation towards historical reliability? Why are you saying that bias hurts the case when it was part of the writing process?
Because Tacitus and the people the people who lied and corrupted this
How are
narrative
you?
about the
How are you
crucifixion.
not applying a
They
modern
had
day
motives.
standard?
Wait. They had motives. They had motives to lie about that, but the early Christian groups who disagreed with the crucifixion
What
didn't.
evidence do you have a motive to say Tacitus had to lie about that? What evidence do you have for that? That Tacitus would lie about the Christians? He talks about them in revolting ways. That's actually one of the
Because
main
he gained
reasons
from it.
that Tacitian scholars agree that Tacitus, this is not like a Christian interpolation or invention. It defames the
Because
Christians. So why would that be Christian invention? There's no motive. What's the
Tacitus.
motive?
What?
What's the motive? What would be Tacitus's motive? To write about the Christians.
Because he's a
they're an unknown
rhetorical
group.
purpose. Rhetorical purpose that could be motive.
That rhetorical purpose is how you speak and interpret things. It has nothing to do with substance of if you're going to write about something in particular.
Tacitus.
You're out of
Okay.
Yeah, you're out of your element on this.
Can I give you more reasons why Tacitus is unreliable?
Well, you couldn't give me one yet. Maybe you can shoot and hopefully hit something. Sure, give me try and give me another one.
Dramatic emphasis, like his writing style often exaggerated events to make them more dramatic, which can lead to
Okay,
a
that
skewed
doesn't have to deal with
portrayal of history.
anything of this. Okay, sure. So what does that have anything to do? Because I know ChatGPT can help you on this one. Point to me how that shows that Jesus' crucifixion is unreliable according to Tacitus' account.
10 minutes.
How can Tacitus prove that Jesus is reliable?
You can't question me. It's my cross-examination. Please answer the question.
If this is okay.
Welcome to formal debate.
Yeah. This is very different. I can't deflect.
I know you got to answer the damn question. See how much you know. Answer
What was
the
the
question
again? I forgot it.
Yeah, so you're mentioning Tacitus. Oh, I think I forgot the question now too. That's unfortunate.
Why is the chat spamming ChatGPT?
ChatGPT, it is child abuse. We'll keep going back though. Yeah, what evidence do you have that Tacitus's account is unreliable when it comes to say scholar. Oh yeah. What evidence do you like? What scholar do you have that would say that Tacitus' account, despite its deficiencies, is unreliable according to Jesus' crucifixion?
Would it be circular if I gave you an Islamic scholar? Because I would give you that.
Yes, that would not work. Islamic scholar is not a Tacitian
Okay.
scholar. He has nothing to do in a field of expertise.
Mhm.
This is like, for example,
But-
going to a doctor
but-
that has to do with your brain and saying, "Hey, can you take a look at my foot? It's infected."
Yeah, but
Not
to be
gonna
fair,
help
your
you.
scholar. Okay. Ronald
No,
Syme.
not my scholars. Tacitian scholars are not Christian. They're secular. So don't even try that bias
Yeah.
thing there. Doesn't work.
Ronald Syme.
Ronald Syme agrees with me. He believes Jesus was crucified.
Well,
I actually quoted him.
he agrees.
Ronald Syme,
Tacitus
in
is
fact,
unreliable.
you know what's really funny? No, he doesn't. You're absolutely wrong about that. In fact, Ronald Syme is the one that even said, I gave the quotation. I can't share my screen again for some reason. But he actually gave the account. I'll post it. It was Syme that actually
give you
noted and quote. Hang on, no,
I can
stop.
give you proof. I'm trying to back up my claims, and you won't let me.
Well, you asked me a question. Well, not a question, but
No, I'm trying to back up my claims. Ronald Syme. Can I back up the fact that Ronald Syme disagrees with Tacitus?
Can you show me where Ronald Syme
being reliable.
disagrees with him saying that Jesus wasn't crucified is not a reliable historical account? Because that only matters according to this debate.
You asked for. Now you're shifting the
No,
goalposts.
I'm
You're
not
changing the
switching
question.
it.
This is a
Start.
fallacy.
The debate is Jesus' crucifixion, not is Tacitus as a whole reliable.
Well, you're the one who
We're
asked
talking
me. You're
about
the one who
one
asked
thing.
me.
Yes, I'm
You're the one who
asking you the
asked me.
question. I've said it both times about Jesus' crucifixion, so I'll say it again. Regarding of Tacitus, can you give me a scholar that says that Tacitus' account of Jesus' crucifixion is unreliable historically? Give me a scholar. You can't find one. They don't
Yeah.
exist. ChatGPT ain't
Yeah.
helping you. I know who Ronald Syme is. I've read his works.
Edward Champlain. He was critical of Tacitus' tendency to write in a way that served moral and rhetorical purposes, often overshadowing objective historical accuracy. He emphasized
Oh
that
my gosh, your
Tacitus' moral
ChatGPT and everything.
judgment
What's his name?
could compromise the factual reliability of this
What's
work.
his name?
Edward Champlain.
Champlain?
Uh-huh.
What is this, like a 1800s guy?
He's a scholar. Are you a scholar?
And,
No,
okay,
so
can
he's
you get
smarter than
the
you.
quote? Can you
So
give
you
me the
can't judge
quote
him.
that he said about Jesus' crucifixion not happening, according to Tacitus? Yeah, give me the quote. I like the
He
quote in
said
the
it.
book,
He
so I
said
can
it.
look it up. Okay.
He said it.
Yeah, give me the quote.
You really want the quote?
Yes, I
Okay,
want the
this
quote
is
and the source.
exactly what he said. This is
No, I
exactly what he
want
said.
you to like type it in the chat if you're ChatGPTing it. Cite your source.
Tacitus had a powerful. Cite my source.
Yes,
Why?
because
can't you
that's
just
what you
trust me?
do in a debate. I'm not going to trust you. You're my debate opponent. What? Cite your source
Okay, hold on.
right
Okay,
now.
I'm gonna go post it in the chat.
Cite.
I'm gonna post
I
it in
want
the
the
chat.
book, the page number, and the quote.
Now you're asking for too many things. You asked for a
No,
quote.
that's how you cite a source. The problem is, Starts, is if you're
Uh-huh.
using ChatGPT doesn't always give you a quotation. And guess what? A cited source.
not
Because
using-
normally a lot of times it's wrong.
5 minutes left.
I'm not using ChatGPT.
Yeah, we heard you typing earlier.
How did you hear me typing?
Yes, you proved my point.
Wait. No. I'm not even typing. Bro. You
Anyways,
didn't hear me
my
typing?
cross-examination. Let me get back on point.
Here, that's the quote. That's the quote. Uh-huh.
Okay, can you give me the page number and the book? I'll give you like how much time do I have?
You have 4.5
1 minute
minutes.
and 30 seconds.
Fantastic.
I
You got
can't.
30 seconds. You can't do it?
Yeah.
So you said you can't?
You want?
Yeah, I know you can't because you
You want a
ChatGPT'd it.
book?
Exactly. Anyways,
I can to prove that I didn't ChatGPT it.
okay, yeah, give me the page number and the book.
Okay, so the book that this came
No,
from.
type it in the chat. I'm moving on to my next point while
Okay.
you do that. Let's see. Okay, here's another good question. Why do you think did you type in the chat?
Hold up. The end of Dynasty.
It doesn't say what you're going to think it says. We can even go through it after the after party. Anyways, why do you think scholars using different methodologies have agreed that Tacitus, Josephus are reliable when it comes to their account of Jesus' crucifixion, despite their differences?
Say that again.
Yeah, why do you think scholars using different methodologies come to the conclusion that Jesus was crucified historically, like using Tacitus, Josephus, for example?
Because it appeared to everyone that Jesus was crucified, so they saw that and were like, "Oh, okay, that's why he was crucified, right?"
That has nothing to do with
And
my question. I'm asking, why do you think scholars come to that conclusion?
scholars
Because,
come
like,
to
for
that conclusion.
example, yeah, like, why do you
Because
think it's
they
only like, why? Okay, like for example, if you think it was an illusion, let me ask you this then. Why should it, when we take the Quranic documents that are 600 years after the New Testament documents and placed in the first century, should we trust them as a more historically attested source to the lives, to the events of Jesus
perfect.
compared to
The eyewitness accounts.
first century Gospels?
Okay, so
Historically, I
this
want
doesn't
historical reasons and back it up by scholars, and you can't use Muslim ones.
yeah, this doesn't disprove this question. Doesn't disprove. It's because this question doesn't disprove the Islamic narrative. Because what you would have
But
to
you
do
agree with
then.
no, that's
No,
not
no,
what
no,
it
no.
is. Because the
No, no, no,
problem
no, no.
is, if you're agreeing with that
My point.
critique, then it shoots your other point in the foot.
No. My point was that the Islamic narrative is more logical than the Christian narrative.
No, we're talking about historical, which has to do with logic, but I'm asking historical questions. You've yet to give me a scholar on any of these points.
Dude, can the 2 minutes end already? Like,
I know you want it to end. It's tough, isn't it? It sucks. We're going to continue, though. So the other problem that we're going to run into here is when we have these different scholars coming to using different methodologies historically, which are secular, non-religious, hence not a bias in our field, and they agree Jesus was crucified. Why are they coming up to this conclusion? Why do you think why do you think that position would not be an attainable position historically?
because they believe in the corrupted Bible.
No, I mentioned Tacitus and Josephus, which you haven't put a dent in my arguments yet.
Dude, why do you keep glazing Tacitus and Josephus? Stop bringing them up, man. It's hard for me.
I know it is, because you can't refute them because they're real. So again, like when it comes to Tacitus and Josephus, what arguments do you have against them?
1 minute.
What scholars do you
minute.
have against them? Hang on. What scholars do you have against Tacitus? Let me ask you this. Tacitus and Josephus are written a little bit after the period of the Gospels, right? And Ronald Syme is a scholar that agrees and says that Tacitus is actually allowed to, and actually writing of the witnesses of Nero's fire, which is written 40 years after. And if that's the same standard where Tacitus would have access to those witnesses of Nero's fire, why is that not the same standard we should apply to the Gospels when it comes to Jesus, since it's about that 40-year difference?
Because the Gospels have been corrupted.
That doesn't help you with the argument. We already went through earlier that if you're talking about certain verses that are forged, that's fine. We already agreed that there can be errors in it. You have not allowed the point when it comes that the 40-year mark is still written during the living witnesses of the event. So why are you playing double standard if you're accepting Syme and you're not accepting the Gospels?
And that's time
Answer.
so starts. If you want to answer that question, we can give you that.
No, he has answer.
Because Syme is a scholar, and the
Syme
gospel
agrees
writers
with me. Syme agrees with me.
Yeah, but exactly
Starz will
that
have the
shows that
last
he's unbiased. That shows that he's unbiased when he is making claims like Tacitus isn't as reliable as you think he is. And I gave you the quote that proved that. Bam. Bam.
No, you didn't. Okay.
All right.
I did. I posted it in the chat.
so
You're ignoring it.
That's the
We will
conclusion.
now go into
Bam.
we will now go into your closing statements. Starts. I'll let you go first. You have 7 minutes for your closing statement.
Mm-hmm.
And start now. Time's on you.
Okay. So, what Blessed tried to do is he didn't refute the Islamic narrative. He failed to do that. So Islam still stands. Alhamdulillah. And also, You guys can all have opinions on whatever you thought that debate was. I felt like I won the debate, but I feel like a lot of people won't think I won, but I definitely won. Because I won, and he failed to refute anything. I feel bad because he's been studying this stuff for years, and now he just lost to a guy who was just studying this for a week, and he just lost, and I feel really, really, really bad. And I'm sorry, Bless. I'm sorry for this, but you're the one who asked me to debate. But I apologize. And for beating and yeah. Stay around for Q&A. Yeah, Jacob just DM me. Stay around for Q&A. I'm gonna stay around for Q&A. I'll answer your questions. But yeah, Tacitus and Josephus, they didn't know Jesus. Their parents didn't know Jesus. Their grandparents didn't know Jesus. They were fishing for information in a sea of fabrication and deception. So scholars agreeing that they're reliable doesn't prove that, because scholars can be wrong, right? Like Richard Carrier, you agree that he was wrong. And Spong and Dan McClellan, who agreed that there's no archaeological evidence of the crucifixion. Yeah, you guys can say who you thought won the debate. I feel like I won. But I think I won, but I think it was pretty close. I think it was kind of close. He did pretty good. He did better than I thought, way better than I thought. He was actually like frustrating me when he kept bringing up Josephus and Tacitus. That was really annoying for me. But I felt like I won the debate, but it was really close. You know what I'm saying? But I definitely won for real. Mom, do you think I won? Mom? Mom? Do you think I won? Okay. Okay. She won't answer me. But yeah. You know what I'm saying? The Ebionites disagreed with the crucifixion. I'm not pulling that out my butt. You guys can look that up for yourselves. That proved the Ebionites disagreed with the crucifixion. Right? And also I technically won because, he conceded to 2 things. I conceded to 0 things. So he conceded to more things than I conceded to, which means I won by default because he conceded to more things. Because he conceded to contradictions. He conceded to forged verses. He conceded to gospels copying each other. What did I concede to? Nothing. I never conceded to anything. That means I won the debate. You know what I'm saying? So someone owes me $600, I think. I thought I won. I really thought I won. I thought I won. I felt like I won the debate. Yeah. I definitely won. The Islamic narrative is more logical than the Christian narrative. The Gospels, not Christian sources to support the crucifixion, are all unreliable. And all the ones that deny the crucifixion are more reliable. Yeah. Yeah. What do you say about that, huh? Yeah. I won. I won the debate.
Do you have anything else with
You
your
have 3
closing
minutes
statement?
left.
Yeah.
Stars, do you have anything else with your closing statements?
I felt like I won.
You have about 2 minutes 40 seconds if you want to use that time, or
I am. All right. I think I might be saying a whole lot of nothing. I'm not sure. I might be saying a whole lot of
Look. Blessed, you ain't blessed.
I might be saying a whole lot of nothing.
Guessing. Think you got the facts,
Josephus
man.
is a historian writing under.
Saturday's coming. You gonna get schools.
Yeah.
Sorry. Do you have anything else
like
left?
a fool. I told you, but you ain't
Josephus
listening.
was a Jewish
Now,
historian
blessed,
writing
you
under
got to
Roman
learn, like,
patronage.
This was a bad decision. Look.
Can I show
Talking
my
like
rap
you
song?
wise, but
No.